Richard Stanley is a filmmaker who has, at every turn, been overshadowed by controversy. To this day, he's best known for the disastrous production of a movie he didn't even end up directing, and his long awaited comeback feature was blunted when a slew of unsavory details about his personal life came to light. There's a lot of questions around this guy, ones I'm not qualified to talk about, to be perfectly honest. I'm not here to ask whether Richard Stanley is actually insane or a predator. I pose a far simpler question. Is he any good at directing? To that question, let's turn to his debut feature, Hardware, a sci fi horror movie about an apartment block in post apocalyptic New York being menaced by a killer android. One thing the film is not lacking in is ideas. Despite some things I'll say about him later, I can't deny that Stanley possesses a wealth of creativity. Almost every scene introduces a new and interesting world building element, but the film's limited scope helps keep it from being too sprawling. It's kind of like Paradise Hills or Dread, where there's clearly a large, in depth world here, but we only see pieces of it because it's a contained story. The practical effects are also quite good. Not just the gore, but the robot villain of the movie, the Mark 13, is really something to behold. The scene where it assembles itself, in particular, has some pretty impressive puppetry to it. But you notice how I'm talking about everything but the central story and characters? Yeah, that's the problem. For as much as the film gets right in a visual sense or even in a lore sense, it really stumbles on the most important fronts. Yeah, when the Mark 13 slaughters somebody, it looks incredible, but it doesn't mean much if I don't give a shit about that person to begin with. It's not that no time is spent on them either, that's the weird part. The movie spends over 40 minutes of its hour and a half runtime before the rampage starts, and yet I still really didn't feel like I knew any of these people. Maybe there just wasn't anything to know. The acting certainly wasn't anything to write home about, and while the script gives several characters a history with each other, they don't have enough depth for those ties to mean something. Also, the story itself, it might sound like a cool B movie idea for a sci fi slasher movie, but when you're watching it, there's one really distracting element. This is just Terminator. Not inspired by, stolen from. Entire scenes are lifted straight from that original 1984 movie, and it just left a bad taste in my mouth. I'm sure defenders of this film would call it a homage, but that's like calling Transmorphers a love letter to Michael Bay movies. It's plagiarism, plain and simple. Funnily enough, this predates all the Terminator sequels, so what this feels like really is Richard Stanley wanted to make a Terminator follow up and basically filmed his fan fiction idea for T2. And in what I thought was kind of a funny detail, a full 30 years before Terminator Dark Fate would make the stupid decision to name its villain robot after a Bible verse, Hardware did it. I keep mentioning how good a lot of this looks, and that's true, but in the words of Peter Griffin,
It insists upon itself.
there's kind of a Robocop esque social commentary thing going on, but it doesn't really have anything to say other than, I don't know, radiation is bad. Look, if you're looking for pretty visuals, you'll get that in spades. If you want a cool sci fi setting that hasn't been run to the ground, that's here too. But me, I need to be emotionally involved in a story for me to really recommend it, and this just does not land for me. Richard Stanley shows just enough prowess as a director to save this film from being a total misfire, but I can't help but feel like the underdog status that's been attributed to him in wake of the excellent documentary Lost Soul may have led a lot of people to overestimate his talent a little bit. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10, but that's as high as I can go. This is T-Quint1 signing out.